New York has no shortage of rail transit, and in my years of making transit videos, I've ridden every single system it has, except for one. This is the Staten Island Railway, just a single line running back and forth on Staten Island, and something I've never really had a reason to ride, because after all, what's so great about the Staten Island Railway? Well, now Avery and I are finally visiting the Forgotten Borough, and as it turns out, there's a lot to love about its railway. But who did Arthur kill? Is New Dorp, New York a wonderful town? And why aren't there fare gates at any of these stations? Well, the only way to find out is to go for a ride. Staten Island is one of the 5 New York boroughs, except that's not Staten Island, that's the birthmark on my wife's arm.
Guys, I really don't know what I'm doing. Kailan, why are you doing this to me?
This is Staten Island. It's about 58 square miles in size and home to roughly 490,000 people, just 5.8% of New York City's population. It's the only borough not served by the extensive MTA subway network. Instead, it has the Staten Island Railway, also operated by the MTA, which runs 14 miles from Tottenville in the southwest to St. George in the northeast. Here, passengers can transfer to an iconic New York transit institution, the Staten Island Ferry, which I'm now riding south from Manhattan. And joining me on this adventure is New York transit expert and YouTube algorithm secret sauce, Avery the Cuban American. Take it away, Avery.
The Staten Island Ferry runs between the tip of Manhattan and Staten Island at least every 30 minutes, 24 hours a day. Tourists on the boat's west side can spot the Statue of Liberty, but from the quieter east side, we can see the Manhattan and Brooklyn skylines, the passing northbound ferry, and the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, which links Staten Island with Brooklyn. The Staten Island Ferry started in 1817, became fare-free in 1997, and is now the busiest ferry in America, as well as the world's busiest passenger-only ferry system. St. George Ferry Terminal, like Hoboken Terminal in my last adventure with Caleb, is a rare terminal for both ferries and trains, and it serves Staten Island buses as well.
So most Staten Island ferries are timed to connect with the Staten Island Railway. Ours was one of the few that isn't, so we're stuck here for the next 20 minutes. Looking out over the St. George waterfront, we see a container ship pass us to the north, as well as another island ferry. Behind us is Empire Outlets, and just down the street we find the Staten Island Ferry Hawks Ballpark, which used to have its own station on the Staten Island Railway between 2001 and 2010. Now, believe it or not, St. George's name doesn't just come from a saint. This neighborhood was purpose-built as a ferry terminal since it's close to Manhattan, and its name comes from George Law, one of the Staten Island Railway's owners back in the day. Sir, yes sir! Back in the station, we head down to the Staten Island Railway concourse. There's a set of turnstiles, but since we took the one train earlier to catch the ferry, our ride here counts as a transfer from the subway, so we don't have to pay extra. Beyond the fare gates are a set of metal doors, with windows overlooking the station's 6 island platforms. Modern departure screens list where trains are headed, but platforms also have these awesome older tech displays for each departure.
The platforms are full of R44S train sets, which date back to 1973, the last cars ever built by the St. Louis Car Company. Each R44S train set has 4 cars. The interiors have blue plastic benches, fake wood paneling, and maps featuring both the railway and Staten Island's bus network. Fun fact, the R44s set the world speed record for a subway car in 1972, where they reached a top speed of 87.75 miles per hour.
Unlike the subway, the Staten Island Railway is subject to some rules of the Federal Railroad Administration, but it operates under a waiver which exempts it from others. For example, it doesn't have positive train control, and instead uses its own cab signal system to prevent accidents, in addition to still using B&O-style color position lights. Operationally, it has a much lower frequency than a subway line, with 30-minute headways outside of rush hour, but it does run 24/7. It was here that a branch once split off from the railway's main line. This went from Clifton down to South Beach and Wentworth Avenue, serving the island's coastal neighborhoods with 1 or 2 car trains, akin to the Franklin Avenue shuttle in Brooklyn. It opened in 1888 and closed in 1953.
Several stops down the line, we get off at our first station, Old Town.
This is a really nice station. I kind of want to take my horse here. All jokes aside, you guys told me to check out Royal Crown Bakery here at Old Town Station, so we're headed that way right now to check out some Italian pastries, because we're doing dessert first. Royal Crown Bakery is located on Highland Boulevard, the longest street in a single borough in the city at almost 14 miles long. Known as the island's Boulevard of Death due to numerous traffic incidents, it's one of the least New York City feeling places I've ever seen in New York City. We cross to the small bakery, which is bustling inside, and gaze at row upon row of treats. I choose what I think looks tastiest. So I got a cheesecake cone at Royal Crown Bakery. Verdict, 10 out of 10 units of insulin.
Another train arrives, and we continue south. So now you might be asking yourself, where are the fare gates? Well, the Staten Island Railway doesn't have any, except for at its two northernmost stations, which is where most passengers get on or off to catch the ferry. Journeys along the rest of the route are free.
Welcome everyone to New Dorp. Now, this name may sound funny if you are an English speaker, but you gotta remember that the Dutch were the original ones to colonize Staten Island, and the name Dorp indeed comes from the Dutch language.
Dorp means village in Dutch. So New Dorp was founded in 1671 following an English resurveying the pre-existing Old Dorp, which is now Old Town, and expanded lots along the South Shore. And the new lots became New Dorp, spelled N-I-E-U-W-E Dorp, and then it was later anglicized as New Dorp with an N-E-W.
So this sign just erased the new and painted the Dorp green for some reason. Here in New Dorp, we also found a diner. This is Cantina Mexicana. It is a circa 1948 Paramount diner. The interior looked pretty original, but there was someone in there and the restaurant's closed, so I didn't want to film creepily through the window. So back here in the head house, there is art, specifically stained glass windows. These were installed alongside two elevators in 2023, making New Dorp just the 6th station on the Staten Island Railway to be wheelchair accessible. Blah. And hello, that's not an R44S. No, our next train is a Kawasaki R211S. The first cars entered service in October 2024, just 2 months before we filmed this, and they're rapidly replacing the older fleet, so go and ride the R44Ss while you can. Is what I said when I wrote this script, but as I was writing this, Trains Magazine announced that the MTA had completed delivery of their final R211Ss, with the R44s serving only as backup power for a few years before probably being retired for good. Some intrepid rail fans have still seen them out on the system, but it's going to be a rarer and rarer occurrence moving forward. Back in the new cars, digital wayfinding is sprinkled throughout, and automated announcements call out stops. Most seating is bench style, leaving a lot of standing room, and there's a generous priority seating area on one end of each car.
Stand clear of the closing doors.
Alright, we have made it to Eltingville, and we are hungry. But thankfully, Staten Island has a wide array of highly acclaimed pizzerias, and we're headed to one right now. We leave the station and head down to the road, stopping to get this epic shot. Then we go to Salvatore and Lloyd's for lunch. We end up meeting Sal, one of the owners, who was born in Italy and now prefers the quieter life on Staten Island to the hustle and bustle of the other boroughs. His pizza is also delicious. And you know what makes it especially delicious? Knowing it was bankrolled by my generous Patreon supporters. Channel patrons get early access to videos and exclusive content. Alright, lunch has been had. How would you rate that on a scale of 1 to 10, Avery?
I rated 9 out of 10.
And now we are riding all the way to the end of the line at Tottenville.
The Staten Island Railway, originally the Staten Island Railroad, was incorporated in 1851, began operation in 1860, and was expanded to its present length in 1886. Electrification began in 1924 as New York state law mandated this within city limits, and officials were preparing for a tunnel connection to the subway system that never ultimately came. The MTA took over operation in 1971. Conductors continued to take tickets until the introduction of the MetroCard in 1997.
This stop, Arthur Kill, opened in 2017, replacing two inaccessible stations to the north and south of it. And don't worry, Arthur isn't killing anyone. Kill is an old Dutch word for a channel, and in this case, the Arthur Kill runs between Staten Island and New Jersey. And with that, we have made it to Tottenville at the very end of the Staten Island Railway. It's also the southernmost station in New York State.
Before we get back on the train, we're going to explore a little. A local bus takes us a few blocks south. Then we walk a few blocks to Conference House Park.
As always on Classy Wheel, we're stopping at a little free library to see what we can find. Avery.
Yeah.
Hey, Avery.
Yes.
Do you want to buy a gorilla?
Sure.
This behind me is the Conference House. It's a famous Staten Island landmark, formerly home to the 17th century sea captain Christopher Billop, who reportedly sailed all the way around Staten Island in less than 24 hours, claiming it for the state of New York. Now, that story is mostly legend, but apparently his grandson, who was a loyalist, hosted a special peace conference between the British and the Americans on September 11th, 1776, which went something like this.
Well, you recognize our independence.
Let me check. Your Majesty, are we allowed to do that? The king says, and I quote, "Codswallop."
Okay then. Down by the water, we can see across to New Jersey. We're also just a short walk away from the southernmost point in New York State, but we don't have time to see it because we have to catch our local bus back to Tottenville. A train pulls into the station and we're off, heading all the way up the line to Tompkinsville, the last station before St. George.
And as you can see, this station actually has fare gates which charge us to exit. The MTA installed them to prevent people from getting out here and walking to the ferry, rather than paying the exit fare at St. George. It's easy to reach the waterfront from here, where we can see a few ferry boats, as well as the National Lighthouse Museum. Also, remember Ballpark Station? Well, it sits on what used to be a much longer line, with stations from St. George to Port Ivory along the island's north shore. This closed between 1948 and 1953.
Like many New York area train services, the Staten Island Railway has express trains during rush hour, and we're at St. George to board one now. This will take us non-stop to Great Kills, shaving 6 minutes off the journey time. During AM rush hour, however, express trains stop at all stops between Tottenville and Newdorp, and then it skips the rest to reach St. George. Overall, the Staten Island Railway moves about 19,000 riders per day, similar to the PACO speed line between Philly and South Jersey.
This is a Tottenville-bound local train. The next stop is Elsinville.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
Finally, we're off in Great Kills, and our adventure has come to an end. So what's so great about the Staten Island Railway? Well, it's a convenient, frequent, electrified, 24-hour rail service to the sort of place that doesn't normally have this kind of luxury. It serves some interesting places in a quiet corner of the world's greatest city that few tourists venture into. Yes, it's mostly low-density development and parking lots, but there's also a few bits of walkable density, with potential for a lot more. Overall, Staten Islanders should be really grateful to have a train like this, and I'm really glad I got to experience it.
And this video barely scratches the surface of Staten Island's storied history. If you'd like to learn more about the Forgotten Borough and its railway, I've created a detailed fact sheet that Caleb will link below. It's basically like one of my comments, but with pictures.
Thank you for watching, thank you especially to my enablers over on Patreon, and take care until the next one.